Thank you, Bianca, for reminding me to record. Because we forgot to do that for the first half of the Notion talk. Oops. But yeah, okay. Welcome to project management at Developh. Um, so this is starting kind of late, so thank you for coming. And again, just a reminder that this event is part of DevelopHassembly. So we're running this week-long series of workshops, talks, and panels, which is basically us students and core members, no professionals, just people who have been kind of building up this organization and have been working in the tech for social good space for a few years now, trying to just gather insights and share it with people. And yeah, we're going to be finishing things up with a general assembly where we're going to talk more about the org's history, our work, our culture, and how you can get involved this Saturday at 8 p.m. So I encourage you to join that. But if you want, you can already look at how to join the core team at developh.org/core. So thank you for everyone who also applied already. Yeah. So just to recap, our organization is like, we used to describe ourselves as just a tech organization, but we're technically more than that. We're an organization that works to accelerate technology and experiences for social good. And we use technology as a bridge towards creation. So we're a space for anyone from writers, artists, developers, and engineers to come together and essentially use your skills to build projects for good. And this is going to be a talk on that. So hooray. Also, if my mic goes weird, please let me know on chat so I can check why. I'm using my MacBook mic and my fans are worrying, so that might make things iffy. So just a note. But yeah, again, encouraging you to turn on your video and use the hashtag DevelopAssembly if you have any insights or want to share something. And at any time, because we may not have enough time for the Q&A because this is a pretty long talk, I encourage you to just ask things. On the Polev, I'll be keeping my eye out for that. Whoops. And on the Zoom chat itself, so I can address it as I talk. But here, just to clarify, this workshop, I guess, is best suited for students in organizations or any student who's thinking about a career with a lot of project management involved or any type of management. It also assumes that there's no prior knowledge needed. This talk is also for anyone who's a builder, a creator, or a doer in whatever sense. And this is also going to be pretty useful if you just want to be more structured and apply project management principles in your day-to-day. So a bit about me. I am the founder of Developh, and I just finished up my second year of college studying computer science and art. My background is mostly in technology and startups. I've been working in like tech product companies, mostly in design roles, but have been now veering into a lot of product work. And all my life, from my introduction to technology, I've definitely just been building things. Like my first ever tech thing was making a Pokemon and Naruto fan site on like webs.com, where literally all I would do is write articles and content and make graphics for it and post it up every day. And since then, just making things with technology has been my kind of constant. And that has evolved into helping larger startups and companies create products, digital products mostly, to work towards their mission. And you're all free to connect with me at any time on LinkedIn, mention you're from DevelopHassembly, and you can also check out my work. But yeah, let's start by sharing a bit. So in the chat, I want you to share a project that you're proud of output-wise and a project that you're proud of process-wise. So this may be projects that you did in your school or a project that you did in your own time. It can be completed or in progress, but yeah, let's take a moment to share. So I guess the first point would be, is there a project that you feel like was really impactful, or were you proud of it, like with just how it came out as a whole, whether it's an illustration or a project that you did for a class or a paper that you wrote? And for the second, is there something that you were really proud of in terms of process? Like, did you feel like you learned from it? Did it not kill you while making it? I would love to hear if anyone has any examples. Thank you, Diane. Output-wise, a collab comic we sold in a con. I've never seen that. You should share that with me. I can't believe I didn't know about that. Jamie shares that output-wise, their favorite thing is a brand book that they made. It's still work in progress, but I'm really proud of it because we're hoping it takes root for the next few years. Victoria shares that output-wise, they're proud of the critical essay I wrote for their journalism class. For Moira, for both point 1 and 2, heading a webinar for Indigenous peoples with a team of 6 other freshmen. For Bianca, process-wise, Figma project for UX University, for UX Society and ADMU, learned research, prototyping, and more all in 2+ weeks. For Monique, was a project head for an event, but it got canceled 2 days. Oh, I'm so sorry. So I guess that was process-wise because it got canceled. I hope you can make it digital somehow. They all sound amazing. For Hannah, process-wise, learning digital art, doing a Filipina art right now, and that's super cool. But yeah, I keep sharing. So I guess for me, a project that I'm proud of Upwise is actually a project that I'll be talking about more in depth later on. It's a project I did with Iboto, with Developh, called Iboto, that I did last year for the Philippine midterms, where we essentially built a voter education platform. And I guess I was really proud of it output-wise because of the impact it had. It reached like a few million Filipinos, but I wasn't necessarily proud of it process-wise because it was really rushed, and there were a lot more people that we could have kept in mind while creating it. And also it was just like very taxing to work on. A project I'm proud of process-wise, I don't know about that yet. I think my process is still evolving. And yeah, I can't really think of something process-wise, which is kind of sad. But thank you for sharing in the chat. These all sound amazing. But yeah, I just wanted to think about like why the projects we're proud of process-wise and output-wise don't necessarily tend to align. I feel like these don't necessarily converge a lot because most of these projects are things that we maybe built in school. Most of these projects are things that we built on a whim, or are side projects that we just do out of passion, where we often don't have like defined goals that you would in like a thesis project or a group work. And it's okay that these don't necessarily converge yet. In Developh, in our organization, it's only in 2020, especially after quarantine, that we've been trying to adopt more proper project development processes. And I guess for all of us in college, we're basically made to create create outputs and respond to assignments under different constraints, but they don't necessarily always teach us good process. Just like how school doesn't teach you how to be super practical and stuff like taxes, I feel like school actually sets us up to be bad project managers. For instance, you have to do like 100 things at once, taking course loads for the sake of it. And at times, it doesn't even feel like that you're actually learning. It's more of just like absorbing the bare minimum that you need to pass or get that goal grade. And then you move on from that. Another thing is that, except for cases like math classes, knowledge doesn't necessarily compound, especially in courses where where the work doesn't really intertwine. Deadlines are arbitrary, except maybe for thesis work, but then like oftentimes like class papers, it's, especially in high school, it was just like whatever the teacher felt was necessary. And then depending on teacher, like from class to class, even if you're in the same course, the deadlines could be completely different. The grading system could also be very like inconsistent. And it really shows you how arbitrary the deadlines school imposes, when deadlines are probably the best thing that school teaches you to work for. Then again, little practical skills. You don't really see a lot of outputs go out into the real world. And in school in general, it just teaches you to value theory over actual execution, right? The thing about project management is that to be a PM, you must be able to execute. And that simply won't happen in school. There's the strategy side of it, but there's also this side where you actually go out and be able to build things. And I think that's why a lot of us find side projects and passion projects to be so impactful. These are the times where we can actually go off on our own and create things that actually like go out into the world and have an impact that we can tangibly measure. And they're not just arbitrary. We do passion projects to influence people or to do something for ourselves. And in school, the projects that you put out don't necessarily do the same. In project management, instead of like doing 100,000 things at once and doing all these like really terrible and bad things that the educational system wires us to do, you're made to learn as fast as you can. Unlike in school where you have to memorize things for a test, you are totally given free rein to correct errors. There's nothing, or there are very few things, especially early on in your career, that will actually be permanent in error. Your insights compound and no work is individual. The great thing about being in a project and having the whole world around you is that you have the resource of people, and you can always reach out at any point, and you have your team in many of these. The deadlines are dictated by you and the world, so they're not necessarily arbitrary, but more about the response you want to see and how fast you want to build things out. And strategy and execution both take shape. It's not that school is useless. You absolutely need that breadth of knowledge in different fields, from the humanities to the sciences, to inform your work. But it only gives you maybe a glimpse of the strategy side and the theory that you need to be able to like make plans and think of projects. In project management, execution is a key phase that school doesn't really ready you for. Well, school is like pretty good for all sorts of inquiry. I feel like the gap is the thing that a lot of people need to do while in school is to take the time to actually build things out while they can, while things are still flexible. So the thing about thinking like a PM is that you get as close as you can to repeatable models of success that won't kill you. I made that distinction between being proud of process and being proud of output, because I feel like the things that students are proud of output-wise are things that are produced in environments that aren't necessarily ideal. So this looks like final projects that we like stay up all night for or end up doing most of the work for when like you have group mates that don't assist you. They're just things that are like, they're things that stretch you unnecessarily because you're made to deal with a handful of other things at once. And if we apply more project management principles to the things that we do every day, the best thing that we can do is get to better frameworks of success and process that won't kill us and will actually help us learn more in the process. So the goal here is to think about the processes that we're proud of today and the outputs that we feel like we've made that are impactful, and how we can mend those together and create frameworks and ways of thought that can help us achieve things more holistically and repeatedly. And just an FYI for people, especially if anyone here is in business or management roles, I've never been in like necessarily formal PM roles. I know that it's something that seems pretty like intimidating. Like when you look up PM, you can see that there's an entire project management institute that I'll be quoting a lot throughout this talk. And there are actually certifications and things like that. So think of this as like a baby intro to project management principles and how you can apply it in org life and your personal life and project. But let me talk about why you should listen and why you should care about the project management process at Developh in the first place. So this event, I think took place sometime in 2017, and we have a whole album of photos of it in the Developh Philippines Facebook page. And it was a Python workshop that we have been planning for. We planned a series of workshops that we did for the first time outside of our high school, because Developh started out as a school club in De La Salle. We saw a greater need across like the entire tech community across Metro Manila, and started making friends from other schools and decided to open up the workshops and programs that we've been running in our club in school to the public. We had a pretty good first workshop. It was in a really small learning center space, and there's some people in this talk who were there. And we taught graphic design. It was really messy, but then there was a high there's like a high amount of attendance, which is cool. So we tried to follow it up with a more technical talk. And for this time, we actually rented out a space with little club funds we had from like doing garage sales in 2017. And the thing about this event was that one person came, and they came like 3 hours into the designated workshop time. It was supposed to last the whole afternoon, and we eventually just sat there wondering what went wrong. And we had like pins, and we had shirts and everything. We don't even have shirts now. And this was like a space we paid 3,500 for the day. It was really traumatizing. And what we did while just sitting around was that we just ended up like recording a workshop that we uploaded later on. But yeah, that's the way Developh started. And now we've managed to, I don't know, just think about the events and projects we run. Now we've gotten to places where I got to speak to 20,000 people about the org and our works. This is an org that was established in high school, and the tendency is that after high school, the people who run an organization will eventually leave it, and it just like drops out of existence forever. But even after moving like across the world, when the organization was set to serve people in the Philippines, we still continued to work on Developh, and we didn't abandon it. And I think that really paid off, right? We got to speak to audiences about our work. We got to impact more students than ever, from failing at a workshop where we only got to teach one person. On the regular, we have events that reach hundreds of people.
I'll go with you later.
We have we have a great community that is consistently growing, and we've launched side projects and initiatives that have just like that have gone so much farther than we've ever expected. And if you told us in that room that we would eventually be going off to conferences around the world, or would still be hustling, but then that hustle would actually go far, I wouldn't have ever believed you. And this was, of course, only a result of us improving our processes and thinking about the way we launch and build projects for people more. But I should probably start out by explaining what exactly is PM. So when I say PM, that means project management. And you'll learn that PM can actually stand for multiple things. So let's go over that. Just a note that definitions will vary from org to org. Like, this is a very technology-based view of what PM is. And PM at Developh will look different from what PM is like at Facebook or Google or Microsoft and at other student organizations. And something that's important to know maybe is the difference between product management, which is, I guess, the more common usage of the term PM. When I refer to myself as PM, I refer to myself as a product manager in my personal life. But in this talk, we're talking about projects. So let me go over that first. So product management is also PM for short, is basically described as defining a product that offers a solution to a problem or need in the market. So product managers work in this field, tend to work at the intersection of technology, business, design, and talking to the customer and marketing. So this can look like services like ride sharing services, software like Zoom, or physical products. Whereas project management, as we'll be using this talk, is defined by the Project Management Institute as temporary endeavors undertaken to create unique product, service, or result. So it also takes form in life cycles, as you can see to the left, that we'll be talking about a bit later on. So project management can look like the donation drives and fundraising events that you do. It can look like marketing campaigns that you use as an org, basically like your DB blasts and header blasts. It can also be used for research work when you talk to your community members. And in project management, the essential goal is to be able to apply knowledge, skills, tools, and techniques with other people in your organization to satisfy the requirements of a project that you define. In its most miniature form, the skills and tools that you use can essentially just be like Google Docs and Messenger chats. I feel like a lot of orgs that I was in, like in high school, essentially operated that way, like having a million Messenger chats or something, and just exchanging like design files through Google Drive, making plans all there, and getting everything lost. But in larger forums, such as in larger organizations, this might look like using project management software like Jira, pictured on the left, or Trello or Asana, if you're familiar with that. And it might look like using more like work-oriented messaging platforms like Slack, Twist, or using email through Google Groups. And there's also something called program management, which isn't as commonly used, but then basically it's for, I guess, recurring and repeated projects. So for instance, we have an accelerator program that was technically a project that we ran last year. So we ran a student incubator and had a kickoff for it featuring a pitch day where we invited the student team. So we're going to undergo our technology accelerator. We had talks with people from industry, and we took a few weeks to plan for that event. And then we had a program, which was our accelerator, where we ran a series of talks and workshops and like technical support and mentorship for the groups in the accelerator on a recurring basis for a few months, and still support some of them today. So that could be defined as program management. But yeah, I think it's important to think about like how we look at project management in Developh overall. And in practice, the leads that we have, so me as a founder and technically like CEO or lead or whatever, and my chief design officer, our chief marketing officer, and our chief community officer are kind of product managers in practice. So we deliver the larger vision of the organization. We generally have a bit more context on the industry that we're serving and the space we're filling in our community. We don't have titles, but then we don't have titles aside from our leads. So we just try to say that we're the ones who set vision and strategy. Bianca in chat is saying that still work in progress for her, but PM is not necessarily just like product. It's just thinking about like projects, being able to work with a team, communicate tasks, and be able to scope things out. And when you're in an organization for longer, you get familiar with the systems and processes that are in hand and are able to kind of give it to your teammates. And naturally, you're also able to communicate with people more and be able to execute more effectively. Just as like, if you're in an organization for a while, you know the projects, you know how things run, and you're able to drive results faster. And when you know how things run, you're able to set up kind of a larger vision and roadmap for what things would look like in the future. So Developh's like core members, which is basically like anyone on 15-member team who works on executing our programs and projects for the greater community. I'd say that in practice, they act like project managers. So we have generally defined strategies and visions for different projects, and our core members are people who work to deliver on these projects by just addressing any resources or needs we have. So we might have defined tasks like someone should create a form for this, or someone should work on going through this Google Sheet and contacting people in it. And although those may seem like menial tasks, someone might be given a larger part of it, like managing like all external relations for a project. So that's how it works. For project managers, I also feel like the scope of it obviously varies from project to project. And because Developh runs so many different events and projects throughout the year, the scope of their tasks and their responsibilities change. And although core members are generally like project managers on the regular, core members who are interested in taking on a new project and spearheading something on their own then get to take on the task of product managers. But then that's generally how we see how people work under the commonly accepted definitions of both roles. But yeah, for both of these, people are really concerned about solving the right problem and solving the problem right. So it's important for us to be really rigorous about defining the right problem based on what the community needs and empowering one another in the team to solve the issue at hand. We kind of recognize that all of us have different like strengths and skill sets and even backgrounds. Not all of us are in technology. We're intentional about selecting a team of diverse like writers, engineers, and designers. And empowering one another is key in being able to know what problem to solve and know how to execute on that. So this is where the strategy and execution side comes in. In both these roles, the fundamentals of PM in either definition are absolutely key too. And it sounds super cheesy, but basically listening, communication, organization, and evangelism are key. And evangelism here kind of means just like creating advocates for your work. In every project in Developh, someone should be able to explain why what we're building is aligned with our mission, which is to help students make things for social impact. And you need to be able to kind of convince people that whatever you're building is on the right track towards that. So as a leader, when we recruit core members or when we convince core members to work on a project, it involves us asking them what their goals are and seeing how they fit into seeing how their goals fit into our organization's greater mission. It also involves like convincing core members who obviously have limited time that the project that we're working on is an important undertaking and is something that they can actually build towards. In understanding these fundamentals, it's also important for us that everyone has a say and everyone should be an advocate for the mission. It's okay to have projects in your organization that people aren't necessarily passionate about. For instance, someone might not be as interested in career development work that we do, as opposed to maybe the more social impact, like initiative building stuff. And that's totally fine. People have different personal missions, but then being able to kind of just like create buy-in and convince people that things are still generally aligned is a key. Another important thing for people on any project is to understand what actually makes a project successful. And the way that I see this is understanding impact, competence, and potential. And you can kind of break this down into thinking that impact are things in the past. So when we have a project, we can kind of measure its impact by thinking about how many people the project reached, how much money we've raised, how many hits something received. Whereas competence is seeing if the members we have are empowered and have the skill set to solve the problem that we're working on. And potential is, of course, seeing where our organization and its individual members are positioned to be in and what we can potentially tackle. So an example of this is that, I guess in the start, Developh was an organization that was very much focused on just like exchanging technical knowledge and skills. So it was mostly about education. But the potential that we saw in the organization kind of drove away from that as we realized that a lot of the people in the team are builders. And now I'd say that a bulk of our work is working on websites and initiatives and ventures that kind of just like respond to issues around us. And in understanding these success indicators, it's also important to know that basically nothing is set and everyone is continuing to learn, and imparting that knowledge and sharing it is key. So let me talk a bit more about kind of what project management looks like at Developh, especially as the founder who's been recruiting so many new members over the past months and has been kind of growing alongside people and championing not only like the individual technical skills that we need to work on things, but also these soft skills like communication and listening and evangelism. So I'd say that at its core, project management is really all about people. You can think that it's all about executing things and bootstrapping stuff yourself, such as in the case of if you were working on a thesis or a paper or something, and you're the only person working on it. But technically, if you had the trust of people with you, that is what you need. That is what the project would look like at its best. And a great quote on this is from Julie Zhu. So a manager's job is to get better outcomes from a group of people working together through influencing purpose, people, and success. And I think about this quote a lot. And it's really important to know that humans and the people around you, especially students who are your peers, and who you should really have no hierarchy with because you're all at the same learning and growth stage, are so valuable. And it's easy to think and fall into the mindset that someone is better or someone is more skilled. And it's important to get rid of these assumptions and biases. So our approach in Developh is generally to kind of invest in student teams so they can become self-managing in the future. It's important to know that no one is incompetent and that you really just have to unlock people's motivations for success. And if you do this well, you can get student teams to be self-managing so that you don't have to oversee them as hard. So I think looking back at our mission is a useful reference point for seeing how we can help our students, because it also closely aligns to how we should manage our core members. We want to bring more young people to create and innovate for the world through education and opportunity. And at Developh, this looks like offering core members the opportunity to speak. Bianca shared a great article in the Facebook group about how it's important for beginners to teach. So thank you for that. And that's a great read that we can also share in the chat. And every kind of young person who walks into our team, we measure how much we're able to help them, not only how much they're able to help us, if that makes sense. So whenever we do recruitment, it's never a measure if this person is skilled enough. It's looking at their potential. It's looking at their present competence to see that if they're a good fit of the projects in our roadmap. And it's also seeing if we are the right team to work with them, seeing the culture fit and the work fit we have, understanding process, and if their process is something that we can easily integrate into ours. So it's also important to note that in any team and organization, you should kind of consider that in your recruiting process. Are you giving a big enough sell to them? So let me talk about the two traits that kind of influence the way we execute and think about projects and guide our core members. The first one is optionality. So it's important to know that the vast majority of core members in Developh and likely in your org aren't devoting part-time, let alone full-time hours on the organization. Like, I'm sure that people can care a lot about the work and costs, but then their worth isn't also only valued on how much time and how much output they can give to you. The reality is that, especially now in the pandemic, your org and your project is not your org mate's first, second, third, fourth, or fifth priority. And if it is, you're in a very lucky and privileged position. And just knowing that the worth and value that people bring into your organization is not solely on their productivity or in their output is key for you to become a better manager. Being upfront about expectations and work is also super important. Optionality to us also means that no work is sacred. So the work in our organization obviously means a lot, especially to the leads and the people who strategize and think about these projects, but then we are not like gods and we are not the best at what we do. We're just trying to be. And knowing that anyone is able to devote time and energy into our cause really just motivates us. In the more project sense, when we say optionality, our core members aren't sorted into any roles or teams. So there's no like marketing team, there's no external relations team or anything. We scope out projects, we share tasks, and anyone is free to take on something that they want to do. So this might be a task that a core member feels like they're well suited to because it's already in their skill set, or they've done something similar in the past, or it might be a task that they want to learn from. And maintaining the sense of optionality is really important for us in working on our projects and helping people be more productive. The second principle that we really take into mind is ownership. There's this really good quote that I also just shared last night to the core team, and it's that sometimes magic is just someone spending more time on something that anyone else might reasonably expect. And it kind of goes like against the first thing, the first trait of optionality, which is why ownership and optionality really come hand in hand. When someone chooses to take on a task, when someone wants to take ownership over something, it's important to us that they care so much about it that they are able to kind of zero in on it and focus on it. And focus doesn't necessarily mean that they're the only one working it, but they're able to understand a task and reach out for help as needed. Everyone shares ability and responsibility in a team, and everyone is given the empowerment to make decisions. And this means making the decision-making process in our organization more accessible. So for anyone in the organization, if we make a huge change, we always try to be upfront and communicate about it before like setting on it, which is kind of hard, especially if you're a really fast-paced organization. But then it's important for everyone to have a say, even if they're not active, or even if they're kind of engrossed in other matters, or if it's not their realm of expertise. There's so much you can learn by making your decision-making process transparent, and empowering people of any position to make decisions is key. And having this shared understanding that we must always communicate is also important. So in ownership, it doesn't mean also going off on your own to do the work yourself, and also documenting things and making things transparent so that anyone can jump in and help. Taking ownership is essentially just like being the person who is go-to in understanding and having a vision for something and being able to share that with the rest of the team. And these traits really go hand in hand. But yeah, so what happens when these two principles are combined, it essentially lets our members learn and explore. So not only are they doing the things that they're coming in with, you're not only letting people who have been doing marketing and pub writing work for so long do that work again and again, but you're also letting your members grow as people. You're empowering them to take on leadership positions, not only in your org, but in their personal lives and careers, and to be able to prove their worth. And you're also able to have fun when it's time to. And as a result, I think it leads to more effective work. We've kind of adopted this in 2022 mostly, and the results have been really great. In our hiring process as well, aside from just focusing not only on what people can give us, but what we can give them, and the latter more so than the first. We've done a lot of work in also making sure that the recruiting process itself is like accessible, so we don't run cycles. We run it year out, because it also happens that like people have their own time, people have their own things going on, and that really helps us in gathering the right team who responds when needed. So let me talk a bit more about the project management process in general. At Developh, something that we always do, and something that we've adopted from like the big tech world, is that we always build towards an MVP. So an MVP means minimum viable product, and TLDR, it's basically the simplest thing that can possibly work. And we build to the fastest thing that we can create to validate any idea we have. So for a project that we did called intern.ph, which is a website that you can visit now. I'll type it in the chat. It's essentially like a database for internship compensation. So you can find out like what companies actually pay interns. And the MVP for that would literally just look like a spreadsheet, and us asking friends where they've interned at and just inputting the results. But we've fleshed that out a bit more into having a form that autofills. For Developh, our MVP for the organization might have looked like us in our first high school club room, like just bringing friends together, taking turns explaining how we built a project that we made, whether it was code or design centric. And these are the different stages of the project lifecycle. It's important that when we think about how we ideate, run, and build projects, that these are just like frameworks and that there's no set way that the process goes. And if in every project you're able to follow this to a T, not sure if the projects are all going super well. Things are really volatile, but then in general, this is a really good framework to look at when you're executing things, especially in an organization with team members. So it goes initiate, plan, execute, monitor and control, and close. So in initiate, the most important things to do are determine the vision. Essentially, at the first stage of every project, we just think about what we want to achieve with it. How does it line up with the organization's goals? Reflecting on that, making sure that everything is adjacent is important. Thinking about if whatever we want to tackle or look at is the right problem, or if we're even the right people to solve it. In this stage, it's important for us to kind of meticulously look at what we're building and who we're building for. On the initiate stage, this is also where our organization would set the goals. If you set kind of like goals later on, or as the project is being executed, it's kind of easy to just be really biased and set goals that are just like self-affirming, which is why at the initiate stage, it's really important to set up the key indicators you want. So for assembly, our goal was to, at the very beginning, was to make Developh less intimidating and to also get some more core members and community members into the organization. So make a great guess at what success looks like. And as mentioned earlier, having everyone in your team be able to know what drives success and be able to know what success looks like is really important. And in the initiate stage, it's also really important to start securing stakeholders. So this might look like the people who are we're actually working on the project within your organization, the project team, whether you need to start a new one or just like grab existing people. Think about the collaborators, so the partners you might have, especially if they're partners beyond like marketing purposes. If there's core people that you're serving, you need to start talking to them and they need to be a part of determining the vision you have. And then initiate stage 2, I think something that a lot of organizations miss out on is to recognize that like collaboration is definitely key. So making this super transparent, having documentation and sharing your vision with as many people as possible, and even just like pitching it lightly to people outside of your organization is important. You will never be able to know if people are already working on something you want to solve and are doing it better, and if yours might just like kind of cloud up or like kind of pollute the problem space. And a project is not a project only if it's something you start from scratch. There are so many ways to contribute something meaningfully, especially when there's existing infrastructure for something. On the planning stage, this is where people kind of scope out the project. So after a goal and kind of loose vision of something is defined, you usually might come together, create a project document and just like spec things out. So how is the work structure going to look like? Are you going to make a Slack group for it, or is it just going to take place in a messenger chat? Be clear about where you'll communicate, where work will happen, where handoffs will happen, and what is expected of people. This is also an important part to craft out the roadmap with the project. And for people, this just looks like a timeline for the different like phases of a project. You don't need exact dates. This can just be kind of like a vision of what the phases will look like and what you want to have achieved and what you want to have validated by certain points. And in the planning stage, in order to actually succeed in scoping out the project, you need to have everyone in your team and all of your stakeholders aligned with what the project is going to look like, especially the MVP for it. So what is the bare minimum that's going to be expected, and what is the next step above that bare minimum MVP? Important framework to think about when scoping out a project is SMART. So just make sure that all the tasks that you set out and the kind of problems you map are specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. So in this stage, really think about the constraints you have and the resources now that you have that that ground you have with your vision and all the stakeholders involved. a lot of people think that project management is only the execution phase, but it's essentially where people start developing and completing the deliverables that you've scoped out in the planning. The leads or anyone in the team might be starting to scope out tasks, assigning to people, and essentially putting things to action. An important thing to do in the execution phase is start tracking tasks as they're worked on by KPIs, which are key performance indicators. So this is anything that might provide evidence of progress. So if you start putting out like a social media page, what traction are you starting to get? Is the project a good idea? Are the tasks you're incrementally working towards getting results? And from that, you could start kind of delivering and learning from the MVP you put out in whatever form that may be. The next stage is monitoring and controlling. I shortened it because it would mess up my slides if not. But in this stage, I think it gets like iffy because this project lifecycle is like, it's like a pretty old framework, and the more fast-paced your team is, like your organization, the more these areas in the project lifecycle tend to get loose. But I guess monitoring and controlling might be just looking at the progress of the project when it's like really underway. Here, it's important to pivot if needed. Important thing to remember, no work is sacred, especially if you're a student organization. It's very likely that something you're working on, while working on it, you might discover that someone else has been doing something similar but better, that you can probably contribute to and create a greater impact from, rather than starting from something from scratch. The important thing to do here is to correct any mistakes, whether on the individual level or in the project level. And in being great at project management, it's key to not only correct mistakes as they happen, but be able to institute like processes that prevent these mistakes from being made in the first place, moving forward. So if a mistake is consistently happening in any of the departments or tasks in the project, it might be smart to start documenting ways to go around it, or start changing the way things work in a certain project area. But yeah, so the last part in the project lifecycle, so note that this is a lifecycle for a temporary project, is basically the close. So in certain organizations, it might look like just like delivering a big release of the project, or in others, you might be going back and forth between execution and monitoring and controlling. So close may just be like really stopping the project process at all. So on close, this is where you really reflect and look at feedback. I think a lot of student organizations I'm in are not super good at doing the close beyond like feedback forms. It's really important to get your team together and analyze what could have been done better on the individual level and in the team level. You need to look at what worked really well so that it can be embedded in your larger processes, and also note that down for larger orgs. And something that's super important in the project lifecycle, especially students, is celebrate your wins. It's not very often that you are young and you actually accomplish something that's put out into the world. And I think a lot more teams need to do a great job at this. Recognize the effort and time that all your members put into something. Things may be stressful, but then in the end, make sure that people are really regarded and acknowledged for their work, especially when no one really owes you anything. And yeah, celebrate your wins. So I can talk about the project lifecycle in the context of one of the biggest projects that Developh worked on. And this is embodied.ph, which I mentioned briefly at the beginning. So basically last year, around April and May, for the Philippine midterms, we launched embodied.ph, which was a voter education resource, a network focused on progressive candidates. And the way we made this was through a website and a campaign, and we ended up engaging millions. Before I talk about this, just want to say that if you want, I'll just like super give a very brief overview of like the wins and the failures that we had in this project. And if you want more detail, feel free to look at my site for it. There's like a case study that details almost everything that I should be sharing in this talk. Yeah, let's talk about it in terms of the project lifecycle. So, yeah, this is going to be very political, but basically, everyone in Developh is very liberal or in the left, and we were very concerned because progressive candidates really had bad results in polls, like in the Pulse Asia surveys about the candidates people were aware of and the candidates people were voting for. So that was really bad. And we've been kind of looking at this as a problem since 2018, but we hadn't acted on it until it was really looming, the May midterms. So around April 2019, kind of gathered together and conceptualized a project that would work to elevate progressive political candidates by just like gathering information and resources about candidates, because there was no comprehensive centralized database of them, especially for progressives who had little resources to create their own campaign websites or go out on physical campaign trails. So yeah, the first failure we had was that Evolve.ph was initiated around early to mid-April 2019. Midterms were already like middle of May. And there were so many polls and like just like information we were seeing about senatorial candidates, and we really wanted to attempt to change the tide even if it was late. So in the initiation stage, we started talking to some people, try to see if our vision was even something that was worth doing. So we went and polled some people, friends and family, mostly people in our schools, to see if there was still a chance to change the minds of voters and kind of influence them to vote for progressive political candidates. And we were lucky to find that like a good amount of even like already liberal or left-leaning voters had no idea about some of the candidates we were putting forward. So candidates like Coyote de Guzman and Mary Colmenares, not a lot of people were voting for them. So not a lot of people were voting for them and didn't have them in their slate. And not a lot of people even knew about them. So we really wanted to kind of address that gap of awareness. And we saw a huge amount of potential in social media where there was so much election discussing going on. And surprisingly, because of how disjoint information is in the Philippines and how everyone is immobile, social media was one of the top areas that people looked at in terms of looking for candidate information. So that was really our key. So we started talking to stakeholders. I was thinking about this project since late 2018. So I had already been like talking, and by talking, I mean like emailing and PMing the candidate and campaign teams of different progressive candidates, all senatories. And I had been in contact with some of them, but then really just like dropped communications with most of them for whoever replied, because I don't know, we just didn't have the resources to work on it or the capacity to, especially because it was like a really busy time. So around April, we started reviving relationships with candidates, the campaign managers, the youth arms of their campaigns, and we started getting information and updates from them, the status of like their marketing materials and promotions, what help they needed, so we could really understand what we could aid them with, and we could see if we could. It was mostly also to get just like information about candidates. It was so difficult to find stuff like beyond the Wikipedia page for a lot of these senatorials who didn't have a website. So we put together a quick team, some Developh volunteers. I got my friends to join as designers. And we put out like a really loose Google form after putting like a baseline social media website, a social media account and website about Envato, just to give us some sense of legitimacy and credibility. And from there, we got an amazing team of like people who were interested in social media management, research, and content writing, who were down to help us with the project. So the plan was basically to make an MVP that would be a voter information, like a voter information platform where people could find information just like how to vote and how to inform themselves about different progressive senatorial candidates. So the website looked like pages for the candidates we endorsed and the candidates we endorsed only, containing all relevant information about themselves, their legislation, their education, their work experience, any quotes that they had, and how to support their campaigns directly. We also put together social media to just like be able to broadcast the website and put out like posters and graphics about these candidates. And we did this all through Messenger, Google Docs. Like we literally just had one huge laggy Google Doc containing tables and information about each candidate. I just uploaded the code on GitHub. My commit history was really bad. And I just uploaded it on like my personal website host. We had less than 3 weeks to execute before the elections. And I say less than 3 weeks was the duration of the project, but then in actuality, we of course needed time to actually disseminate the MVP we had and actually reach people so that it would be useful. So getting it out as fast as possible. So it looked like a few days until, it looked like a few days, like 2 or 3 days until the first website was out and that we were starting to share it with people. So for our workflow, we just loosely broke down tasks. We had no task management tools. I didn't know the emails of people. I just literally had like their messenger contact for many of them. Got design and engineering support. Mostly got content and research help, which was really key, and had people help manage social media and our relations with campaign managers. So it really just looked like we need people to manage the online campaign, to get people on the website and know information about the candidates. So this is really what it wanted to look like. And in the execution, it's really bad. I'm proud of the project, but then this is why it was like that. I think there were points where a lot of people were working on the same thing at once. I was kind of leading the team and directing what was happening, and I was still in college in America in April. School year was ongoing, and the entire team was, of course, in the Philippines, and our audience was in the Philippines. And in order to communicate with people, I just like completely messed up my sleep schedule like now. So I essentially worked on Philippine time throughout that last month of like my project season and finals. And it's in the execution stage where we kind of step back and try to evaluate, is this something that's still worth building on? And yes, we were getting a lot of like traction and support, especially from the direct campaign teams of the candidates we were working with. So we thought it was a worthy project to keep continuing, even though it did seem futile, right? There was such little time left. There were like news websites had their own versions of candidate trackers, but then we still think we had an angle and a product that people couldn't really compare to. So in my case study, I kind of broke down what the planning stage looked like for. There's a lot of recruitment and really defining the project. There was a stage that I didn't really talk about, but we thought that this would first be a website for all types of senatorial candidates, but then we switched to only endorsing like left-leaning candidates. So that was a big change. And I think it's also part of the success we had. And there was a lot of design work involved, especially in the marketing and promotion cycle after the initial website went out. And also maintaining that website was key. We had a lot of changes that went to the content and a lot of new updates that were rolling in from campaign teams and from all the debates that were suddenly happening. So keeping track of that was important for us. for monitoring and controlling, after releasing that MVP after like a few days, our work was really focused on seeing how we could maximize impact of Ibotta.ph. So we noticed that when we delivered like content straight on social media, which means like creating poster versions of the content we had in our website, we had like great results because obviously they don't have to click through something. So in response to this, we ramped up our design and content work to create shortened versions of stuff that we could deliver through social media. There were a lot of great results on campaign updates. So we started doing stuff like information on like polling results. So we continued this throughout like the midterm itself when there was a lot of like voting mishaps. We started reporting on any like fraud that people were noticing, and tried to become this like really citizen-centered platform for sharing information as well as endorsing these candidates. And we got really great reach and insights. So these are just like some of the posts we have on Facebook. And for the close, after the final results were released, it's obvious that from the current senatorial slate, we didn't really achieve the result we intended to. But then the goal of the project was really to just like make more people aware of the values and beliefs that these candidates had, and kind of expose them to just like more people in politics who have long been advocating and doing legislative and campaign work, and being able to link up with these campaigns and even help people to kind of join in on the campaign updates of like Nerigal Manaras was super interesting. So in close, we also started thinking about reviving for the 2022 elections, doing what we can, continue supporting the work of progressives, discuss the impact of the team. We revive the group chat every now and then just to share voter results. We had a medium for Ibotta where we just like published articles reflecting on the work, and I also published the case study I had so people could learn from the process from our entire process. So yeah, that is essentially Ibotta.ph, and it is a really constrained project, and it is not the ideal project management workflow. So this is an example of a project I'm very proud of in terms of output. And even if the process wasn't necessarily good, you can see that we still did walk through all these phases. And as you continue to build things and build things with intent and focus on like validating what you build and talking to people and responding to what people really want, you will see that you end up like following these steps, whether intended to or not. Because I definitely did not intend to follow that. But let me share with you some of the tools that we use day to day in Developh's operations, which is like an organization that I definitely work on like a few hours or more a day, just to help you get a sense of maybe what software can be used in organizations and for larger projects. So for communication, all Developh work happens on Slack. We actually also migrated Ibotta to Slack too, but are also thinking about migrating to Discord or Signal for safety. But this is a snapshot of our channels. So yeah, we have a lot, and I'm not sure if that's ideal for everyone, but then just because we have things that are very separate and distinct, we find this form helpful. If you have a project, we have like proj dash and then the project name. So right now you can probably tell that we have been mostly talking on assembly, but also working on consistent community work in other channels. We also use email a lot if we have individual reminders, or if we have like a roundup that we want to send to core members, we'll send that through email. And what we do is we add all our team members into a Google group, which is like so weird and underused, but then we add them there. So we just have to email the Google group, and we create like a alias for it. So we just email like our whatever core email we have. so it gets sent to everyone. And we still have a messenger group just for casual stuff, reminders, but we're always trying to move away from Facebook. For communication with our community, you're probably familiar with this, but we have a Facebook group just because like all communities are still on Facebook. Facebook groups are really bad for just like casual chatting. So to fill that gap, we have a Discord. You should definitely join if you haven't yet. And for project management, we still have everything in a Google Suite. So we have our own Google account for Developh, and we've actually upgraded it so we have more storage, but I don't even think we're using like the 100 gigabyte storage we have. And the big thing that we use that you may not know about is our linear. So we've tried different project management tools in the past, like Notion. We had a Notion workshop yesterday, Asana and Trello. But what we use right now is linear, which is really designed for code. And it's where we just like break down tasks to their smallest level. So you can see in the screenshot that we have like tasks for the workshops, the workshop graphics, for assembly, photo albums, working on registration confirmation for participants. So we just put that there, share all the information and context needed. And this is a look into what an issue looks like on linear. So there's a description where we constantly update with like the deliverables that are needed for the task. So we'll link to the collaborator link for any forms. We'll just list down like schedules and on the right, something that's super helpful is that we can link to tasks. We can mention the status of it. We can assign tasks to people. We can mark the priority and the urgency of tasks. For estimate, we can estimate its complexity. We don't use that often though. And for labels, we'll just sort it into like this work revolves around community or design, and it enables our members to be able to filter like issues by label, based on what they want to work on or what they want to explore. And there's also a project field that we use, especially for our side projects. Like we have CAUSE, which is a hub for youth organizations from the Philippines. And if we have tasks related to that big side initiative, we'll mark it under that project. And this is what an issue list might look like. So it's just a sneak peek of things that I have had on my plate. So you can see all the active issues and who's working on it, the complexity of things and how many sub-issues might be under them. And it's really, really useful. We get to mark things whenever they're in review, share feedback with one another, and comment on tasks so we can exchange like discussion on them and never gets lost in Slack or in any other group chat where it's like unless you're in that conversation and in the present, you kind of miss out on everything. So the context for everything we work on is present in these issues. There's some other things we use that have been helpful. Lately, we've been using Loom a lot, which is this tool that's available on browser and both desktop and also on mobile, where you can basically record like a video easy, and it's super useful for asynchronous information. So the screenshot is actually me explaining how to use linear to people, and that I just recorded so that I didn't have to gather people for a meeting and that they can just watch it anytime. So it's really useful, especially because it's hard to call for meetings for people, and I don't know why it's harder than necessary to record screen, but Loom solves that. It's also free for education. So if you have an EDU, I super suggest using it. Will save you from a lot of unnecessary meetings. For social media management, we use Buffer, which just allows us to post on Facebook, Twitter, and Insta in one go, and also schedule posts easily, and also look at insights and analytics. But yeah, that's how project management and Developh generally works and the tools we use. I hope that was helpful. And if you have software that you use in your orgs, that we didn't mention. I would love to know what you guys use, because yeah, I feel like in most of my organization work, we either use Slack or just communicate through Messenger, and everything just on Google Docs. And if not linear, I'll see people using Asana or Notion. So if there's another tool that you recommend using, especially something that's accessible to students, I'd love to hear you share it on chat. Yeah, let me share some principles on how to be a better project manager. And these are just like principles that we didn't necessarily come up with, but principles that we've adopted from over the years and what we do and how we use them to inform our work. A lot of these are things that I abide by, not only in Developh, but in all the organizations I'm in. So I hope you can learn something from them. So the first principle is that maximizing mission is key, especially because we're a tech for good organization. So beyond anything, in all your tasks, projects, and work, you need to stay aligned with what your organization's core mission and principle is. And if a project doesn't seem aligned with it, you really need to investigate why and if it's worth doing. In everything you do, it's key to question the benefit that you're delivering, because oftentimes there's something that can be done that's more impactful. Important thing to note also is that the most impactful work and the work that really delivers a lot to your team is not outwardly visible. So things like talks and running events and doing them yourself is very it's something that you can easily see and that people can acknowledge you for. But then sometimes these aren't always the actions you should prioritize for your organization. It's of course okay, especially as a student, to weigh whether a project is going to look good for yourself on your portfolio or resume. But processes, documentation, and influencing systems, especially if they're dated in your org, and also just the way you communicate and the way you influence others, which is something that's not really measurable by anything, or really important. And great project managers are able to influence all of these things and are able to know that these things are important, even though they're not things that you can share in a LinkedIn post necessarily. The most impactful work is really not seen. It just influences everything from the bottom up. Another thing about project management, really just want to emphasize how key people are in project building, and how key people are also in terms of problems. So basically the concept of problems being interpersonal at their core comes from this psychologist called Alfred Adler, who coined the concept of individual psychology. And it's just that understanding psychology, humans, and molding your relationships is key to everything in life. And incidentally, how projects are built. You will not be able to build everything on your own. You need people at every stage. And the way that I think about this is being able to gain and inspire confidence, which is a great way to manage and control the relationships you have in your life. So inspiring confidence in yourself is being very self-aware in a good way. So self-confidence is self-awareness and introspection, right? It's as a human, it's impossible to ever be satisfied in yourself, especially if you're an overachiever type of student who's probably watching this talk. But it is possible to know how you learn. It's possible to know how you confront challenges and optimize your plan for kind of confronting mistakes and knowing that you're able to conceptualize something to solve these mistakes and better yourself. Being able to improve yourself and being able to stick to only self-comparison is one of the keys to confidence. And another part of this is just knowing that you're in control of you and that you need to focus on controlling what you can control. Beyond that, nothing else really matters. And third part of this is that many more things are controllable than what you might necessarily expect. I think it's easy to think that things are spiraling in your life, but then if you just be more forward and upfront, and simply like ask for things more and communicate things even if they're difficult, you'll find that you can gain this kind of self-awareness in all of your relationships easier. Confidence in yourself is also courage in being disliked and living life your own way. In the same way that I say that impactful work is not always visible, there's a lot of hard work that you have to do that involves taking risks in other people's assumptions of you. You're meant to break and change the kind of systems you're in. And if that takes being more vocal and not adhering to the kinds of cultures and systems around you, you really have to go ahead and kind of risk that in order to be impactful. If the right systems were in place, then the problems we have in the world would be solved, but they aren't. So have the confidence to go above that. Inspiring confidence is also inspiring confidence in others. There are vertical relationships, so relationships like boss and employee, or you and your teacher, and there are horizontal relationships where everyone's equal. Hopefully, in instances like your barkada or in your friend groups, the goal here is to make sure that all relationships are horizontal. So in Developh, we have we have no set roles aside from our leads, and our leads are just people who are positioned there because they're more well versed in their domain and can guide people in tasks involving that. But it's important for us to know that everyone, whether they're an old member or new, has the same potential. It's up to you as a lead to have the confidence in someone so that they can actually unleash that. Your job in life is to be able to like not constrain people. You have to be able to inspire people to do the best that they can. Because really, people are just blocking other people, and if we could have more confidence in one another and just believe that everyone has like good intentions, or at least guide them towards that, that's key. So you need to know what makes, so as you know what makes you motivated, do your best to unleash that in others. And an important part about this that took me a while to learn is that you need to be more straightforward in both criticism and praise. So at the same time, while you can point out mistakes in others, also you need to celebrate the things that people do more. You need to be more grateful for things that people do when they're not necessary. And even outside of the org context, whenever someone around you creates something, even if it looks like foolish or bad, really, you need to be there to offer constructive criticism. You need to be there to like acknowledge them or offer them praise, and even in the smallest ways. And it's really key into inspiring others. And if we were more vocal about these things, both in our lives and in our organizations, we could see a lot more. We could really see like impact and confidence being exchanged a lot more. So bias for action is a principle that comes from Amazon's leadership like page principles. And here the quote is, speed matters in business. Many decisions and actions are reversible and do not need extensive study. We value calculated risk taking. The thing about being in a student org is that it's easy to be safe. It's easy, especially to copy what other organizations are doing or do what your org has been doing for a long time. But the thing is that as a student, you have a lot of flexibility. You don't have to be safe all the time, and you absolutely should take risks, because the impact you make in the organizations you're in while you're in high school and college set you up for how you're able to perceive and change things when you're in your first like company or when you're starting out in your career. So you have a lot more legroom to fail. So the earlier on you can try and make bigger decisions that put you at risk, the better. It's like at Developh, if we see a user need, we work on a project to address it. And something we do is prioritize speed. We're very fast-paced org, and like unintentionally, we get to say that there aren't many times we get to say that there aren't a lot of student organizations doing something we're doing. Especially because our mission as an organization, at least in the Philippine and Southeast Asian space, is that like it really positions us to be able to influence a lot of tech for social good projects. And even if something wasn't necessary, we can still execute quick even if something isn't like necessarily new, we still can execute quick, get more feedback, and utilize our network and resources if we believe strongly that there's something that better that can be uncovered. Another thing to think about here is that meticulous planning won't help if there's no action. Strategy is only like half PM, or maybe even just like a fourth of it. You need to be able to act on things and tangibly see the results and be able to learn from those. You won't get real results from pure strategy. And on the organizational end, like especially if you're a leader, it's better if your members can feel the outcome of their results. They need to feel rewarded. Beyond praise, it's nice to know that things are actually out there and tangible. And especially if you're a builder, I'm sure you know the feeling you get when you see things go out into the world and how they kind of impact people. But this is like a very loosely followed thing. Obviously, you need to make decisions and actions with intent. And sometimes there are lots of like unnecessary steps that you can make, especially if you fall quickly into the fail fast and break things idea. So another way to go around this is, again, really just document decisions, get everyone involved. Quick decision making without making use of all the talent and perspectives and people in your organization is an easy way to continue just like falling to a bubble and dooming yourself over and over. And again, I want to go back to like solving the right problem and solving the problem right. So in anything you do, try to be data driven, try to be research driven. Exploration, research, and insights must drive you. Kind of counters the other principle. Like, while many decisions are reversible, you need to not only ensure that you're God's at execution and building things, but that you're taking work that is actually worthwhile to investigate and spend time on in the first place. That's why the two parts of the statement are pretty important. And a great way to start thinking about this and start being someone who solves the right problem and solving the problem and a great way to be someone who solves the right problem and solves the problem right is to consider being problem first, not solution first. And many of us are solution first. So how do you be a problem first? So quick thing to think about is definitely, again, empathizing and stepping back. We're a technology organization, and in our approach, I mean, if tech was a band-aid solution to everything, then there would be a lot less problems faced today, especially because there are so many companies and innovations with far more resources than we are, and with some of the most talented people in the world working at scale to solve things. And they're not really solving most of these things. So it really shows you that tech is merely a bridge and a tool, not the end means. And in building things that develop, this is something we really keep in mind. Another thing that's important is to recognize the privilege you have and even being able to build for other people at this stage. And it's important to always challenge the assumptions you have, especially in that initial stage of planning to build a project. You need to clarify assumptions and constraints. What are you in a good position to do, and what might bring more harm than good? The second part of being problem first is being able to break down problems really, really well. All important problems are nuanced, and there are many frameworks for identifying problems, but a very simple one that should help is the 5 whys. And it's basically just asking why until you can diagnose the root cause of something. So if the problem is you running a red light while driving, the first why might be you ran it because you were late for work, and you were late, and the second why might be because you woke up late, and you woke up late because you slept late last night, and you slept late last night because it goes on. And pro tip as a leader, when you're listening to other people try to propose solutions or projects, and you're not sure if the problem that they're thinking of is actually like a real problem, learning how to diagnose it by kind of talking one-on-one with someone, or talking about the problem in a meeting, and trying to subtly ask these whys until you can break down the problem is a skill that you should learn, especially because you don't want to like butt in and try to, especially because you don't want to butt in and kind of like not be able to see their line of thought. So just being able to ask why a lot and ask why with intent at this stage is really key. At this stage, it's also a good idea to start talking to the people who actually face the problem you're thinking about. Do an audit of the field, think about your competitors, and realize that as a student, all your potential competitors are probably potential collaborators. Point that I also kept bringing up is that really humans are your greatest asset and you need to involve everyone, get all their perspectives and their feedback in. So ideate with everyone. Your team is your greatest asset. There might be people in your team and in your org who have a bit more experience and have been there for longer, and they can definitely give like valuable insights, but they're not always the ones who give the best solution. So in any kind of project planning phase you have, even if someone's not even in like the role or committee that is working on something, try to make this like problem diagnosing process like open to the rest of your organization. You'll be surprised about what people who have very little like outward connection to it might say. And when you execute while being problem first, just know that no work is grunt work. And when you confront and know that confronting ambiguity is a great task, and know that you have your stakeholders, you have your team, you have people around you, and you need to learn how to ask frequently. Also, I did not finish writing this slide, but then the problem solving process is not meant to be beautiful, is what that was supposed to say. So this is going to be messy and you're going to have to be backtracking. But knowing how to identify problems is like one of the key roles that you'll take on as a project manager, or as anyone involved in any project or in any problem in life. And if this was an easy process, then yeah, we would have a lot less problems, but then that is not the case. So the best we can do is try to get better at it, and we can start applying these processes to our organizations. The last principle that I want to share, it was kind of mind-blowing for me, was also something that might dismiss a lot of the previous points. So just take that into note. Is this point that I heard from Breaking Smart Substack short podcast, and it's about planning to start versus planning to finish. So the concept is that when you're writing a novel, there are the types of people who are plotters, who write really sophisticated and complex plot points from the very beginning. And there are those who are pantsers, and they just kind of write as they go. And the thing about plotters is that you get a lot more satisfying endings. Like, you know, they really stick the landing, and it feels like things fall into place and nothing is necessarily sudden. It feels like things climax into something really important and key. Whereas pantsers, their benefit is that they have this kind of narrative vitality and liveness and spontaneity. The thing is that these don't really matter in project management. The strategy and the plotting and the planning, there's no form of it that will make you better than other. You really have to make up for things in the execution phase. And also, this concept kind of fails because we're not writers, and the world is continuously moving ahead of us. We aren't in a world that we can define and constrain very loosely. Maybe in certain passion projects and side projects, yes. But then if you're in an organization and working on projects in response to like social issues, this is going to look really different. So the key thing that you need to think about instead is about planning to finish and planning to start. Planning to finish is how people normally plan. It's your familiar kind of planning where there's a terminal state, there's a defined end, and you have a desired outcome. So in your initiate stage, this is like the goals that you might set the response that you might have wanted out of your project. But then there's also planning to start. Like it's about kind of having the materials, the resources, and the people prepared for you in in the process of like being able to execute something. So you have everyone at hand. And when you plan to start, you get to optimize for creativity, and you also maximize your ability to pivot in response to kind of the needs that you see users have, especially as you execute and monitor the progress of your project. And it's important for project managers, especially students, to be able to plan to start. And the way to do this is essentially to craft systems rather than goals. So if you're in an organization, you're in a great position to do this. And while it's nice to have like metrics and performance indicators that you want to hit, it's important for you to also think about the systems that enable you to be flexible, to be able to be fast and adaptive and iterative in the first place, rather than just setting project after project where you aim to like raise funds for someone or to raise awareness about something. Having defined goals doesn't always work out because you will never know like the real need at the planning stage. So being able to plan a start in the sense that you optimize your team and empower them to be able to be ready to solve something is key. So yeah, think about systems rather than goals. Think about the future of your organization rather than just like the future of your project or the committee you head. There's a lot of potential to kind of better impact on entire systems rather than just like tiny events that won't really matter in the long run and might inform how you run events like that in the future, but don't really inform like your greater thinking and for future like organizations or like career endeavors you might have. Yeah, that was my last principle. That was the last point I had. So thank you for listening to this talk about project management. Really hope you guys learned something, whether it's just the definition of PM or if there was a principle here that inspired you and that you're looking forward to apply to your own organizations or projects. But yeah, last reminder again, this event is part of the assembly. Don't forget to fill out the feedback form that was sent over in chat to get the stamp that you can put in your kit and join our community groups for the upload and recording of the talk. We'll share when it's up, maybe after assembly or earlier, and encourage you to share your takeaways and insights. The thing that I'm really eager about is that a lot of you probably come from different backgrounds and have like your own systems and frameworks in your passion projects or in the orgs you're in. And I'm curious to see what you agree with or what you might not. And feel free to challenge me on anything. I'd love to hear. If you have questions, you can ask them to Paul Ev, and I will stay around a bit more because I have nothing to do and it's 10 a.m.
Yeah, check the Polev. Some people said it's
Paul Ev
closed.
is dead.
Yeah, it's dead.
This is depressing. Okay, let me open the Paul Ev in case anyone has questions, but you can also ask in chat. But yeah, thank you so much for coming to this talk, even if it's late. Yeah, if you have further questions about project management, whether it's like as a career or whether it's in your orgs, because I'm very interested in bettering how like orgs better their process. Or if it's about your side projects, I'd love to hear about it and support you in any way. I just fixed the Polev, so that's also there. But feel free to leave if you're done. It's pretty late in the night back in the Philippines. So I hope you all sleep because it is Tuesday night. But I hope this was helpful. And yeah, I will say if you have questions. Thank you, Ali, for sharing. Don't forget to fill in the feedback form through the stamp. Is the Polyp still closed? Try to refresh if it's not working. Bianca, what's your takeaway? You want to summarize it before I end the recording?
PM is hard. PM's about people. That's the biggest takeaway I have. And that's why it's hard, especially for those who get really drained easily. Because especially
Yeah.
as a lead, you have to follow up all the time on other people. Because like what you said, like of course, like the org isn't like everyone's like first or third priority. It's not top of mind, which is why you really have to like make it top of mind constantly. Like, hey, do this, because they really won't do it out of their own initiative, from experience.
Yeah. I think also something that's important to note, and I want to share it for the recording also, is that like the type of leaders, like Bianca has been in Developh since 2017. Has led Developh since then also. Wait, was it since 2017? I don't know. Just um, and the leaders, basically the leaders we were when the organization still started out, and when we were like running events that only one person attended, it's like very different, and we just like learned a lot. Both Bianca and I are also like, we're both introverts, right? And in high school I was probably just like a very terrible controlling leader, like who would just like be the type of person who would do everything in the project and not care so much about the investment of other people, I guess, aside from giving them a good grade. And learning how to move beyond that and be a lot better as a person has been key to growth and to, in general, just being more effective as a person and being a more decent human being. Um, yeah, you don't seem like an introvert where you are. And I think something that has been key and also developing as leadership is definitely like the self-confidence points. Like not necessarily like like I'm not necessarily eager to talk to people unless necessary. But then it's like being an introvert who's very direct and upfront when needed and not really caring about like other people's assumptions has been very key to me in becoming a better leader. And it shows you that you don't need to be like that type of controlling, superior, loud type in order to be a project manager. You just really have to be kind of empathetic and self-aware, and you also have to care little and risk things.
Okay,
Yeah.
I will now ask you a question from the pollen.
You touch yourself.
Okay. Okay, I'm gonna ask this first one because it's really loaded. I'll listen to the chat so you can process. How
Thanks.
do you conduct investigations? Do you have any insights when it comes to processing data? I saw the investigation parenthesis cards about what the site you used to collect info from feedback forms, but it was so nice, parenthesis end, for the Developh and also Evolta. My biggest question is how to get valuable feedback.
Actually, Bianca, I feel like you're better positioned to answer the first part of this question. I think I can answer the second. Is that allowed? You want to answer the first?
Wait,
You
why?
did the community, because you did the community research.
Okay. So for context, we recently just finished doing like UX research for the org. So what we did was we rapidly like reached out to some of the most active members in our community, and by reach out, that was me PMing them, because like what I said, you're not top of mind, you have to like get top of mind for them. So aside from that, we also posted it in FB so like more people could know about it. And then for that interview process, yes, that is our scary affinity mapping. There were two parts. First, there was a Google form that we made as short and easy as answer to possible. You see, those are some of the questions we've had. I based that form on this community canvas template. It's really good. So if you're gonna make like a form for that, always try to look for existing frameworks or structures, because you know, like nothing is original. It's better like if you have like that to inform you. And once that was done, we asked some people if they consented to an interview. Most of them said yes, and there you were able to really draw like deeper insights from them. Like for instance, the idea for this assembly. And as you can see in the screen, what we did was something called affinity mapping. Basically, we put all those messy insights, we dumped them all in, and then we had some of the core members and us like arrange it to see like common themes or trends, so on and so forth. You can answer the
Yeah.
end part.
Yeah, so as like our design lead, Bianca ran this really great investigation where we've basically been thinking about how Developh has been intimidating and how we want to like make our community an actual community. Community building is really hard, and she worked on this investigation process where she did interviews, released the form, and then we had this great session in the org where everyone just went on Figma. This is Figma, by the way, which is a great like it's like Photoshop but then collaborative and lightweight, and it's free for students. So highly encourage it. Um, and yeah, we took the insights and clustered them and have been using this to kind of inform the work we do around community. This is a really great investigation process. So thank you so much, Bianca, for your design work in this. It's amazing. I'm still like in awe. We thought that like the clustering session would take a few days, but it ended up taking just like a long session, one random time. Um, and the second part of that question is how to get valuable feedback. And this is really hard, right? Because if you're building projects or products, you obviously want to know like what people are feeling and thinking, and be able to craft like actionable items from that. And um, a big part of being like a product manager, I'll say, is that when you're talking to people, and talking to stakeholders or anyone involved, especially your users, you need to talk to them as frequently as possible, and know how people are feeling and thinking and using or encountering your project at every stage, and be able to and yeah, just get both like their verbal insights from when you talk to them and ask them for feedback, whether it's like through email or chat, or observe them if you can, if it's that type of project. And you have to be able to kind of filter out the verbal feedback. So what people like what people say doesn't necessarily align with how they feel. So mapping out how they think, how they feel, what they're saying. I'm pretty sure there's a design framework for that I can't think of it at the top of my mind. At the top of my head, I mean, is like important. So be able to map that out. Yeah, and filtering feedback is key. And the next step to like having like tangible feedback, and responding to that is being able to anticipate what your users need. So again, people don't know what they want, and it's your goal to act on that. So um, by analyzing all these portions of like how users act, and feel, and what the industry looks like, and how your competitors and like community members and how like collaborators are doing, is going to be key for you to be successful, in not only like gathering valuable feedback but like anticipating like next steps and basically anticipating feedback. Yes. Bianca, do you want to say the next question, or will I just say it? I can just say the
Well,
one in chat.
I can ask more. I can basically bunch them up into questions about relationships and leadership. This one is a relationship question. How do you go from vertical to horizontal relationships?
Yeah, so again, the vertical relationships are like where there's kind of hierarchy, where there's like someone with more power. Um, and horizontal relationships are where everyone's equal and everyone has a say in decision making and communication. And I think it's a given that you can't have a horizontal relationship in every case, but in your teams and in your organizations, the best way to go to horizontal relationships, especially if you're a leader or a manager, is to empower people to make decisions and to empower people to be able to not only execute on like tasks that you define for them, but make sure that they're able to be a part of like defining problems and defining like the vision that you're heading towards. And if they're able to do that, they also inevitably become like more valuable team members. Um, there's a lot of ways to kind of empower people to be better at making decisions, like empower them with context, with documentation, so that they know so they know like the context that you have in your decision making process. So there's that. Also establish a culture where people are open, and where people feel like they always have a say, um, and that's in making and that's making like your meetings like very like not exclusive, not only centering on certain people that you already know, not only centering on friend groups, focusing extra time on people who might not feel like they're included socially. And I think like the latter is probably more important, if you're a student, especially because there are a lot of like introverted students who don't feel like they are empowered to contribute or they're shy socially. I think those are the best things you can do in a student org. And I know that can be challenging because I feel like a lot of student orgs, basically, a lot of them are also orgs because of the social aspect. Um, Trying to be as open as possible is just the best way you can do that. And I don't think it can apply for more social orgs, but then if you're building projects and products, yeah. Um, just empower people with context, empower people and constantly reassure them and pay attention to ones who don't have a say, who don't always have a say or who don't always like speak up, and making sure that they're valued is something that you need to do. And if they feel like an equal to you, you achieve that.
All right. Thank you so much for that. That's so deep. Wow. Okay. Another voted up question. This time about like, did I answer this already? It was asking um how advice for people who want to lead but are introverts. Did you kind of answer this now in your previous answer?
Oh yeah, it's upvoted. Yeah, I kind of said that like when we were talking before the Q&A, where basically you and I were introverts, but then we became leaders. Because like right, introversion is just about how you're like shy. I mean, introversion takes place in many forms. Maybe you can give context on what type of introvert you are, but like for me, I don't like talking to new people, or I don't like social situations. But I'm fine with like workshops or talks. I'm fine with like reaching out to my friends impromptu. But like you can, I think a baby way to do this is like a baby way to lead while being an introvert is to know that you can like kind of detach like the leadership process from like the social um side of introversion. Like if you get comfortable in talking to people like through like whatever workspace you're working on, or giving feedback in different ways, eventually you'll have more influence in your organization and you can step up into leadership roles. And that doesn't necessarily mean the type of like classic um, social situations that introverts might find themselves uncomfortable in, because it kind of feels like work, but then at the same time it's also social and relationship building. So Oh, Bianca said introversion is getting more energy in individual activities. Yeah. I think the benefit here is that honestly, like in the recruiting process in student orgs, is like you can be someone who who contributes very well on an individual level, and you're trusted to then manage people, even though managing people and being an individual type of contributor and like creator or builder or marketer or designer or whatever is like very different. So at least you have that advantage also, that they equate like individual output um to leadership. So there's that. But then yeah, when you step up into the leadership role, or when you want to try and lead, just really start out by giving feedback and like talking to people in the work context. Then eventually, like work relationships will always stem into like caring about the person, supposedly. So I think it's naturally just gonna lead to that. Yeah, you just have to ease into it. And if you're an introvert who likes working and eventually will want to lead, I think that's a great way to think about it. Yes. Okay.
Okay. Another. I think this is a very relevant question for us, relationship-wise. How to deal with org partnerships or clients that are too demanding, or when the partnership is too performative.
Like org partnerships, like for events, I guess.
I think that's the main application, but I think it's also
Yeah.
like long-term stuff.
What long-term work partnerships? Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's. Well, this is a project management question. For partnerships or clients that are too demanding, I think the best thing you can do is from the get-go set like boundaries, and set expectations for what exchange is happening in the partnership. Um, and you can always refer to it when you feel like something's too demanding. If it's demanding, like in terms of what they're asking for, really just refer to it and stay firm in the initial offer you had. Or just like really be clear about your rationale in why you feel like that might be unreasonable. And I'm sure for your organization or context, you know why. And when the partnership is too performative, what does that mean? Is it like it only deals with presence and you're not actually gaining tangible value from it? I think like again, just really evaluate the exchange that's happening in the partnership. Task your best like people person to be able to really talk about like the terms that are happening. I think something that's helpful for us also is like going on calls with people, because I think for org partnerships, at least like student org to student org, people just usually like send primers and PDFs to one another. And very rarely do you get to see like people's rationale and line of thinking in what they're working on. So if you have that opportunity, really go for that. Talk to them and understand why. And also you can explain like why you feel like it's too performative, and you can settle on a better agreement. And I'm sure they'll also learn more about like how you feel and take that into note in not only your partnership but in their others. Bianca, you can read your contribution.
Oh, okay. So I also wanted to answer this question. It's why it's important to have goals or values as an org, like what Chia said about like setting those goals at the start of your project. So whenever you reflect on that partnership, you can weigh it against those values and goals. Yes. Also, under upvoted question, which I think is also very
You didn't
interesting.
read the tweet.
How do you gain buy-in, as in a more system-based leadership kind of buy-in from your fellow leaders, if you don't entirely have a choice of who you work with? Ooh.
You even connected the correction. You're so advanced, Bianca. um, yeah, I mean, in any new organization, especially if it's not an organization you founded, you will not really have a choice on who you work with because the recruiting and the team isn't up to you. So how do you gain buy-in? Like, there's a great guide on what to do in your first 30 days as a PM, and all of that is about establishing trust and respect and gaining context about your work situation. And if you do that in your first 30 days, that should go like that's really going to help you get like trust from other people and empower you to make bigger decisions early on. Because like if you're working with new people or people who you don't have a choice to work with, obviously it's hard to influence them. It's hard to even feel like you have an impact in the organization. Let me link the article. What's an engagement tracker? Lately, when there are orgs that, like, say, for this partnership, you'll like our page, you'll give 30 likes to our page, and then for for you, we'll give you 10 likes. They now send Google Sheets where you can list down the people who gave the likes. It's an engagement tracker. Or at least that's the only engagement tracker I've seen. Yeah, I guess it is. But then technically, whoever owns the page can already see all the people who liked it. So it's just making it easier to see. So I don't think it's necessarily a privacy issue.
Okay, few
Yeah.
more questions.
Wait, I was supposed to link the article.
Sorry. Go lang, sorry.
There's so many different variations of this, but then when you're new, really just do your best in establishing context, set expectations with people. You need to like schedule one-on-ones with people, get to know them. So try to talk to people on a one-on-one basis, not just in the team setting. And figure out how you can add value to people on the individual level too. I think that's really going to help you gain trust from other people. And you really will have no choice in who you work with in most of your organizations, and managing how you develop those relationships from the first day, or just like in general day life is important. And if you're a student in an organization, I think a very easy way to do this is make sure you care about the person, not only in the work sense. So try to think about them in the context of like how they're doing in school or what's going on in their life, because the org is a very small part of it. And then I'm sure they will trust you more also in terms of work. And it's just a great principle from learning how to work with people. Then you have a friend who you can talk to about regular life beyond the work. Yeah, it really helps you get trust more. I used to only talk to people in the work context, but then just like caring about them more on the individual level is important. Why do you have class at 10:30 p.m.? Thank you, Isabella. Yeah.
Okay, another question. Ooh, how do you balance helping your org members grow while advancing your own skills at the same time? Yeah, this is important, especially as like a designer, dev. You are.
The easy way to answer this is that when you help your org members grow and you hear from them, you get their perspectives, you see how they work, you see their work processes, you see how they tackle problems. You also learn yourself, right? Like, like most of the things I know, I can attribute it to a person that I've learned it from. And I think the same can apply to many other people here. Um, and when you offer your time and energy to helping like your org members like pick up a skill or work on a project, firstly, like those perspectives and insights are invaluable, and you won't be able to get that anywhere else. So you're also growing from that very app. But you're probably asking that in the context of like like upskilling yourself in terms of technical needs, and obviously it's hard to do that if you're managing lots of people and onboarding them to an organization and teaching them about like these like the workflows in your org that you're already super familiar with. So the best way to do that is probably really just set like an individual work time where you can focus on like technical skill development for yourself, where um, oh, like something you could do this, like for example, I do a lot of design work for Developh still. Really just teach someone the process that you've been like using and working on for a while. Teach someone how to solve the problems that you're solving, already have like an idea of how to solve, so that you have time to work on like something new, um, and be able to develop like a new framework while they're picking up something that you're already like familiar with. I think that's a great way um, to like onboard new people, especially because like student org cycles are so like fast. Yeah, I think that's a great way to make time for yourself to um, like build on new skills by taking on new challenges. Yeah. Yeah, could you have advice for that also?
Um, ooh.
Yeah, you just
That,
need to set out like
yeah.
individual time in addition to management time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Also see that personal time as like essential to like your leadership stuff. Yeah. Like if you're learning design, of course it's gonna also like help you like grow your members, right? You can't like go one after the other. It really has to be both talaga.
Yeah. Also, you know, the ability to help people learn and the ability to like teach people and onboard people on your process and communicate and articulate it is so valuable. And when you help your org members grow in that sense, you're really helping yourself grow, because those soft skills are things you can also only learn by execution, right? You can only learn about how to communicate and teach people in practice, not just in theory. So those are super valuable traits. You should also perceive that as growing. There's a new question.
Yeah,
Did
I
you see
saw it
it?
also. Do you want to answer it? It's so scary.
Yeah, so the question is, what was the biggest conflict you've had within the org and how did you manage that? And I think like, I feel like I can't think of a single conflict because there were so many. um, but something I've been thinking about a lot and something that might be relevant to people is like, I developed started as a high school club, so we were all in the same high school, we were all friends, and I still wanted to continue the org even though like in college, which was essentially very difficult because yeah, some people in our group of friends, so like we were all like very bonded already socially, said like yeah, gee, let's continue the org. And she of course just like dropped off and got busy with the first year, and didn't help that I was like 1,000 miles away and we were all remote and we didn't have the luxury of being able to see each other each day and have that like that kind of almost forced relationship by just like being in close physical proximity to each other day to day. So basically the conflict was like, yeah, we had to figure out how to revive the organization and keep it afloat in this entirely new system, while also sacrificing kind of the social relationships we had, and recognizing that, you know, that some of them would be severed org wise, and some of them were also severed like because they're walking through different paths in college. So yeah, that transitionary period from high school to college where we were like almost dead for a good year, like we didn't really have any big projects, was pretty difficult. And I think something that I had to learn was like that I could forge new relationships with people, and that I had to invest in these relationships in a much more different way. Yeah. Bianca. Yeah. Um, I'm not gonna read that, but yeah, like it was easy to kind of have that initial group of org members, because we had all been going to the same school for like how many years of our life, over a dozen years. Um, but then when we moved to a remote organization, I had to learn how to build relationships with entirely new people who I didn't necessarily share the same background with, who I didn't share those like same 12 years with. Um, and Bianca and I had to do that. And it was very difficult. But then it also taught us so much more, about remote team building, about how to make friends that are new, that you don't just have because of shared Catholic high school trauma. So yeah, that was a big learning. Yeah, sorry, it's not like a project conflict, but yeah, that was a big transition that we had to do. I hope that makes sense.
Ooh, there's this other question. A lot of people like Iboto. The whole process for Iboto is so interesting. How did you learn what you needed to learn in order to make the whole case study for it?
How did I wait, what?
They're asking, in short, how did you learn all the skills that you needed to learn for it? Like, was that your like first
But then
technical PM project? The first thing you kind of PM, or
yeah, I guess it is the first like legit technical PM project. Yeah, sorry, I read it at first like how did you make the case study for it? I was like, whoa. It's a website. Um, I don't really know how to answer this because it's just like the sum of like learning how to build with Developh definitely helped a lot with the process. I also actually a big part of like the case study was also going back and evaluating and talking to some of the members and seeing what we actually had put in practice back then, and actually laying it down and documenting it because I had no time to as it was happening. But yeah, being able to manage all the technical and design aspects of Iboto was very much a result of just being able to like, was just a result of like all the side projects and ventures that we've kind of built with Developh, and finally putting them into action. But yeah, like the case study is very refined and polished because I kept looking. I wrote it like early this year and I've edited it a lot just to like write down the process and detail what we actually did, break down like the steps that we took in each phase. So I definitely did not even know what I was doing as I was doing it. That makes sense. But yeah. Okay, is that the last question?
wait,
No.
let me check. Let me check.
There's the how do you deal with close-minded people?
Did you answer that or not yet?
Did I answer that? I think that was also in chat. Yeah, from Monique. Okay, let me answer this. This will be the last one. How do I answer this? Yeah, so if you want to deal with close-minded people or anyone, you just have to establish buy-in from people, which essentially means like you have to get people to trust your decisions. And as I mentioned earlier, a good way to do this is just like invest in people socially, and trust in them, as human beings you before you only see them for their work potential. Um, and you really have to do your best to be able to understand the person's motives and intentions. So what drives the person? Why is this person in this org? How does this person's like personal causes and advocacy like align with what we're doing or building? And in Developh's recruitment process, we also really focus in on that. So just a side note then, we always ask what people's goals are, what their like personal advocacies are and what they want to do in like 10 years. just because there's a potential, right, that we really won't be able to align with them, and being able to align with them is important in being able to work with people properly. So really just like do your best to understand someone's motives and intentions and use that knowledge in giving them context and reasons to be able to align with the work you're doing. You really have to do your best to convince people, and obviously that's not something you can do in every case. So try to leverage the other people in your team to help convince them, because definitely someone has more context on them, or people have context on them that you won't. And yeah, just you can also just be like kind of upfront about maybe why it's kind of been difficult or frustrating to convince them to something. Like if they're close-minded in general, which it seems like the question is pointing towards, like it's a good it's something good to bring up, because you can't really change that also if you've exhausted like all your efforts in kind of leveraging like the social aspect of them, and if you try to uncover their motive and you don't know what their motive is, yeah, it might be difficult. It's not always something you can solve in student orgs, but then just like use the people around you to help like try and talk to them. Yeah, I'm trying to like think of a specific instance where I had to like convince someone who wasn't on board with my decision. But then there were also cases where I was the close-minded person in that scenario. So that's just something to think about too. That I thought my solution was like the better one when it turns out theirs was. And so you really have to involve other people in it. I think that's something important. After exhausting like social connections and talking to them one-on-one, involve other people in. But yeah, okay. I think that was the last question. Was it, Bianca?
Yeah,
I've
no
just
worries.
been talking to you for the past hour. Okay, but yeah. I'll end this. This has been so long. My Zoom says this has been running for 2 hours, 42 minutes. So thank you guys. Um yes, you're still here, but then it's only her voice I've been hearing. So I've been kind of going like, I'll end this now. Thank you so much, guys, for coming, and I hope you really learned something.